Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ Tims with Tims Nation. Give a special hello to all my friends of the Silver and Gray, the Gray Knights. Today I want to take a deep dive look into Gray Knights and where they fell after Arc of Omens. In my personal opinion, we're looking at one of the armies that could be top tier in the meta moving forward. Their secondary game got really strong, and the point decreases allow us to bring an army that really synergizes well with itself. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do. Turn on the bell for notification to get notified on more videos that faction focus, such as this one. Like, share, as well as leave a comment down below. Some of your comments help generate some of the videos that I put out there, as well as I just love the interaction within the community about this game of Warhammer. With all that being said, let's jump over into the Grey Knights. Now, to start things off, I want to say that this is my checklist of how I build an army for a tournament, for a GT, or any competitive format. This is how I look at an army and decide what units I want to use. This may not work for everybody. This might give you some advice and some push into the general direction, but you need to play the units you're going to want to play. If you don't like the army that you're playing, you're not going to have fun with it, and you're not going to want to play the game. That's the number one most important thing. For me, this is my checklist of how I go through when I'm trying to build an army, and maybe some of my advice or my ideas could be something you can bring to your game as competitive and casual. So, the first place we're going to look at is the Grey Knight secondaries. Anytime I build an army, the first thing that I look at is their secondary game. If you can't score points, you're not going to win games. The Grey Knight secondaries get a huge boost with Teleport Assault going up. And Purifying Ritual, well, you have to spend, it's one more Warp Charge to cast, which isn't entirely that bad, considering Teleport Assault being less intense and requiring less focus on this secondary. So Teleport Assault is the one that we're going to go with first because I think it's the most important one to the Grey Knights overall, the list construction and how the Grey Knights are built as a whole. Teleport Assault now used to be worth 4 points in all these same conditions and required you to basically dedicate 4 turns out of the game to figuring out a way to complete this. Teleport Assault scores now 5 points at the end of any battle round that a unit that arrived via Teleportarium, which is basically Deep Strike, landing 9 inches away from an enemy unit, Gate of Infinity, or a Shunt move. If any of those units destroy an enemy unit, you score 5 points at the end of that battle round. That means 3 turns. 3 turns and you can maximize that. This allows this specialized smaller army to not have to stay aggressive the entire game. It allows you to castle up and play defensively and push into the later phases of the game. This is tremendous for the tactics of the army and doesn't telegraph all your plays, because if you go into Teleport Assault in the prior iterations, your opponent would know you're going to have to keep pressure on them. And if they don't need to keep pressure, armies like Necrons, Votann, and Tau, they could sit back, bunker up, and make you waste command points and gating units and Dread Knights and throw these things in front without any extra support that would then get turned around, eliminated, and you wouldn't even score your secondary points on. Teleport Assault, I think, is going to be a linchpin for this army, considering that it basically just plays on what the army does. You can Deep Strike, you teleport, you shut. These are all little things that we're incorporating into the army anyways, so why not score points off it? Purifying Ritual, again, is kind of self-explanatory in the sense of why you would take it. We're an army of Psychers, and it's a very easy Psychic secondary. It's been an easy Psychic secondary since the book came out. Purifying Ritual reads that you complete a Psychic action that is a Warp Charge value 6. You complete it on an objective marker. You can do it multiple times in a turn, as long as it's on different objective markers. For each time that you complete this, you score points based on the number of times it's completed. 1 completion will get you 1 point. 2 completions get you 2 points. 3 completions will get you 4 points. And 4 or more completions score 5 points. This is a secondary that you don't need to have huge pressure on. 2 objective markers can score you 2 points and keep you on a positive and moving forward. And when you are able to hit that 3rd objective marker, that 4 points can really catch you up. One thing that I try to remind people is that 15 points divisible by 5 is 3 points a turn. So as long as you're able to keep an average of 3 points a turn, you're looking at a 15 on that secondary. Both of these secondaries work very, very well together, where you don't have to over-dedicate into Purifying Ritual to max out and score it, and now you don't have to over-dedicate into Teleport Strike to max out and score it, allowing the Grey Knights to play from a more defensive stance. That's only 2 secondaries. Where does the third one come in? Now this goes into my personal preference. We could talk about retrieve battlefield data, and that's one that I've thought about a couple of times because I run 30 interceptors, which we'll come to in a minute, and those guys could complete that pretty easily for me. However, I don't like how far it pulls my army away from my central force in order to do that. I think that right now I'm kind of leaning towards engage on all fronts. It's not one that I'm looking at an easy 15 on and probably won't max out most games, but because of the aggressive stance that I plan on playing with other units in my army, I feel like engage on all fronts is a very strong, safe pick for my army. I don't like behind enemy lines, and I know some Grey Knight players do like that secondary, but I feel like over the course of the game, we're whittling out our resources in dividing them out, small increments, to be able to score this. On top of the fact that it's very easy for large armies and veteran players to zone an opponent out and not allow them to be able to score any behind enemy line points for almost the entire game. Now that we've covered the secondaries and given a kind of overall battle plan of what I'm thinking how my army is going to play, what is the army going to look like? With Arc of Omens, we have to pick one compulsory choice, one force slot that we're going to take 3 of. And for me, that's going to be the heavy support. Reason being is, out of the fast attack, there's only 1 unit I'm taking, and I'm going to take 3 of them, and that's really about it. So I took the heavy support as a starting point because I figured if there's any choice that I might go into a 4th or a 5th, the heavy support slot would probably be it. When looking at the army and the selections that I have, the 3 units that jump to my mind as being the most competitive to start a core around are Paladins, Interceptors, and Dread Knights. The ones I went with were the Dread Knights and the Interceptors, which we'll come back to in a second. The Paladins. The Paladins have some of the best defensive abilities in the game, and man, they can crank up the damage in a heartbeat. Being able to get hammers that can hit on 3s instead of 4s. Hammers that hit on 2s again instead of the 3s on your Paragons, and be able to have the amount of damage that they can put out on those hammers, even though they still cost points. I would recommend splashing a couple in there just because of how high damage they can get up to. The Paladins really can put out an excessive amount of damage. They're very, very defensive, very resilient, with being able to access to armored resilience, as well as the ability to switch their psychic power. Paladins are the only unit that's able to pick their sanctic powers, and that can lead to some really interesting combinations of what you can do with the units. They can be taken from 3 to 10 mans. A 10-man can combat squad, so it can be split up into 2 5-mans, which means that if you take 4 special weapons, such as side cannons, you could separate and have 1 5-man Terminator squad, Paladins, with 4 side cannons, and another one that's more close combat ready. For me, to get to that level with the Paladins that you want to run, the amount of points that you're investing is still very, very extreme in comparison to a counterpart that I choose to run in the Dread Knights. I'm not saying it's completely dead in the water, but I don't think that they have the speed, and I think that a lot of people are still prepared with the guns and weapons that are available in their army to be able to cleave 3-wound models. Now, the other disadvantage that these guys have, there's 2 main disadvantages that personally deter me from running them. One, how character intensive these guys are. You need character support for them, whether it's a Brotherhood Ancient, Apothecary, Drago in some scenarios. They need character support to be able to run and function. Without the character support, they're just a really expensive data sheet with some cool psychic powers. So that's where it kind of pulls me away from the Paladins. I could see some of the arguments of, well, yes, but if you dedicate into Paladins and then one gets removed, you have more Paladins to be able to move these characters over to support those other squads. And that may work for you. That might work for you. But I don't like the lack of speed, the toughness 4, when a lot of 3-wound models are looking at T5 or have easy access into transhuman, where we have the true silver armor, which is going to cost us 2 command points or 3 for a big unit. Weird. They don't want us doing that. They don't want our Paladins to have you can't wound us on better than a 4. It's just the way it is right now. We're not Primaris. You know, we're still in the old Marines, the firstborns, and that, or whatever it may be called. Someone can correct me in the comment section of what the actual Grey Knights are as of right now, but that kind of puts us at a downfall. Puts the Paladins behind the 8 ball as far as competitive play, when some of the other armies that you look at with their 3 wound models have either access to transhuman or a toughness 5. So the units that I choose to run are the Interceptors and the Dread Knights. First of all, Dread Knights have probably the best access to our guns in the game. The Brotherhood that I'm running is the Sword Bearers, which has been one that's been seeing a lot of competitive play prior to this, since the vehicle buff is so strong. The psychic power being able to give you +1 to wound is huge, especially when going into T8 models such as Hecatons. The volume of shots that come out of it, as well as the silencer now, AP1, actually matters again. And these guys are able to teleport strike, which means they can use the shunting stratagem and with their teleporters, as well as the fact that they can just eliminate a unit quick from 24 inches away so they don't get charged and just completely beat up, and score those 5 points for teleport strike or the teleport assault. They're psychers as well, so they can land on an objective, complete a psychic action for you, and still shoot off. One Dread Knight could theoretically score you 6 points by itself, 1 for a purifying ritual point, however you want to look at it, and then 5 for the teleport assault. The Interceptors just fall into an area that if you haven't run Interceptors in your Grey Knight army, you are really missing out on a great opportunity, because who knows, next book these guys might be on the shelf. But right now, Interceptors play like anybody has always hoped jump infantry would play, even though they're not jump infantry. Go figure. They have the speed, they have the stats, they have the weapons, they have everything that you could want. And losing Armor of Contempt, it hurts, but not that much with how fast these guys are. They also, with their teleporters, have access to be able to perform a shunt move, which means they can end up across the field on an objective marker that your opponent may have left undefended, and sit on that objective marker and start casting Purifying Ritual till they need to move away and do something else. Interceptors have been a linchpin in this edition for me and for many others because of just how fast they are. And by taking them in 10-mans, you can combat squad them as you wish to be able to cover more of the board. For me personally, I have one squad that is built all with halberds. That is going to be staying as a 10-man, while my other 2, one with falchions and one with the swords, is going to combat squad to 5-mans. That doesn't mean I might not change my mind during certain matchups, but typically that's how I like to break it down. So I have 4 or 5-mans that are very quick moving and able to take objectives and cast Purifying Ritual, while still having one big 10-man to cast Sanctuary on to give an invuln and be able to move across the field more aggressively as an infantry that can move directly up the middle through runes and everything else. So, with that being the core of it, we still need an HQ. And we still need some powers and some buffs. We're Grey Knights, we need our psychic powers. So what does this mean for our psychic powers and our psychic game? I initially, when I first put together my Arc of Omens list, actually made a mistake in a good way where I was underused in points. Those allowed me to drop my Librarian and upgrade him to the one and only Lord Calidor Drago. Drago, to me, has been one of the best support casters in the army. He can sit back, hold an objective, and if anyone gets close, he's got an attack profile to beat him up real good. He is a natural 3-up invuln, which is awesome, as well as the fact that he comes with 3 powers. What I love about that is that even though you can only cast 2 of them, that 3rd power I usually make Warp Shaping, and that's a safe place to keep that power because I do love changing the tides during the battle. My next HQ is a Librarian, who's actually going to be my Warlord, so that I can, well, it doesn't matter if he's the Warlord or not per se, but I feel like he's one to keep, is a little bit easier to keep alive in the end of the game, so I don't have to worry about my command point generation over the course of the game. And he is the one with Psychic Epitome. He is the Mortal Wound engine, coming with Purifying Flame and Vortex of Doom. Now, I have a couple points left over, and I've considered giving him the Gem of Inaktu to be able to have a little better reliability on the Vortex of Doom, Curious on what your guys' thoughts are with it. I have a couple points left over. I'm thinking that's the way I might go, but not sure yet. Seeing if people have used and seen how does that really help those vortex numbers. I mean, +2 seems good, but is it a trap? Is it something that's like, oh, you're going to use it and then you're just going to pass it? You're going to feel like I don't ever need this, or is the one command point to roll it on 3d6 plenty? And maybe I should look at another vision or wisdom. Moving over to the number one, which I think everyone, if you're building Grey Knights for the first time, your number one HQ that you should buy is a Grandmaster Dread Knight. The Grandmaster Dread Knight just does so much, especially when you give him different wisdoms and relics and everything else. I have mine kitted out fully to fight to the end of the game. I gave him the once per game 3-up Invalm, which one thing, if you want to take a look at this, is kind of a adorable little note that I noted. When you use the 3-up Invalm, it stays until the end of the phase. So if you use it in the shooting phase, you have it during the assault phase. Keep that in mind because that is a very, very strong relic. The second thing that I give him is I get these mixed up. I get the sigil and the throne mixed up all the time on which one's which. But the other ability that I give him is the ability to jump away. Once per game, when he is at a target of a shooting attack, he can pick up and redeploy anywhere on the battlefield 9 inches away from the enemy. That enemy unit can then reassign its shooting. This just keeps him alive. This means that he can hit turn 1 and try and get that teleport strike, and when he gets shot at, can jump away. One thing to keep in mind, this happened to me once in a tournament, and I didn't catch it until afterwards and never made that mistake again. It's very easy for your opponent to ignore that ability, not shoot at that Grandmaster, and just charge him and get damage in there in that way. So when you land him, keep it mindful on the 24-inch range and try and utilize that to the best of your advantage. As I said before, I'm running the Sword Bearers army for all of the different buffs that they bring, and the Grandmaster being able to jump up with Empiric Amplification on top of the Sword Bearer Psychic Power, on top of Psychic Ammunition, on top of him being a Psychic Onslaught for his guns, on top of him having a 2-up ballistic skill, means that he can hit and shred something really, really fast. If they don't have any psychic defense, you're looking at a guy who can get in there and just absolutely shred whatever target you want. Keep in mind, a lot of the Grey Knight psychic powers specifically target a unit, a malediction, and mean that that unit can get beat up by the rest of your Grey Knight vehicles or psychic weapons. So you don't necessarily want to go too far and too crazy with what you're bringing, because once you eliminate that target, everything else does kind of diminish in how much damage you're really putting out there. When the side cannons start dropping in, they're going from damage 3 to damage 2 and reducing their AP and everything, you'll start to really notice that and really kind of wish that you might have held back those Dread Knights. So all in all, that's the list that I plan on bringing. How I put it on the table is going to depend on some of the maps and some of the circumstances, as well as some of the armies I play against. A couple of things that I keep in mind is, does an opponent have an Auspex scan or any other ability that lets them shoot at me when coming out of reserve? Typically, those abilities are maximum of 12-inch range, so it's easy to still be able to land and shoot at the target I want as long as I stay further than 12 inches away. 24-inch range, not too much of a problem. Do watch for it, though, with some of your psychic powers, such as Empiric Amplification, which I believe is only an 18-inch range. Still, that's more than 12, but keep that in mind with some of those psychic powers so that you don't fall into that weird void. Also, don't be afraid to put a Dread Knight or two in reserve. I personally will put my Grandmaster on the table and 1 Dread Knight. This way I can spend 2 command points on the shunt move and then gate my other Dread Knight over to be able to bring 2 Dread Knights to the forefront. Then I have 2 Dread Knights in reserve that can deep strike and do work later on in the game. Recently, I put a 3rd Dread Knight on board because I knew my opponent could potentially get into my backfield, and I wanted to just have a Dread Knight that was more centralized to still be able to clear off any of the deep strikers or units that arrive from strategic later into the game. You want to try to not focus on your primaries in the early points of the game. And what I mean by that is get your two, take the game, turn it to a hammer and anvil, which is the longer stretch of the game. This will allow you to be more protected in your deployment zone and not have your opponent get in and take out some of your softer, squishier guys. One of the last units that I run for this reason that I didn't mention before is I was able to get a 5-man squad of Terminators in there. Terminators are objective secured, so they can hold my backfield objective and kind of protect Drago and other Psychers, as well as cast Purifying Ritual while Drago's doing other things. Having that 5-man Terminator is tough to remove, easy to protect that objective, and protects my characters that might be hanging out in the backfield later in the game. One fun piece that I didn't really mention into this is that I'm currently running a Vindicare Assassin. Why? My army synergizes really well, and I didn't know what else to spend the 110 points on. I did consider a squad of Purge with Psy Cannons, but I just don't like how they overall perform. I feel like every time they hit, I spend a lot of command points and they just fail. Speaking of command points, this army starts with 4. I only use 2 command points pre-game, one for a relic, one for a warlord trait, so that I'm able to start the game and shunt on the first turn, and it doesn't hurt me that bad. Shunt is 2 command points to use, and that can get real expensive real quick, but it's one of the best abilities out of the Codex, right up there with 1 command point to do Psychic Onslaught for your Psy Cannons and Silencers on a Dreadnought. All in all, this is what I'm looking at right now as possibly my competitive list to be bringing in this recent season. I haven't decided which army I'm going to play yet, but man, this thing looks good. It feels good. It feels like I'm really playing Grey Knights as they should be played. Very quick, very fast. I'm sad that I can't really figure out how to run the Paladins right now. They have always held a special place in my heart, but right now I do love my Interceptors. My Interceptors are all converted from old Sanguinary Guard. And for my birthday this year, I got myself a Grandmaster, cut them up real nice to have a real nice Grandmaster Dread to go into my collection. So all in all, there's a lot of work that I've put into this army, as well as my display board, that it presents well. So I just haven't decided yet. Maybe you guys can shed some light on some of the stuff I'm looking at or thinking. I know a lot of people are going to say, drop that Vindicare Assassin, but hey, don't we all want him to work? Don't we all want him to actually function and do well in this game, secretly in our hearts? Tell me in the comments section below. Thanks for watching this video. And again, subscribe and turn on the bell for notification to see more videos like this again real soon.